Today we are going to be ranking all of the Souls games. I'm sorry that I still sound a little weird in today's video. I'm feeling a bit better than I was yesterday, but I'm still feeling pretty under the weather, and if you see me not smiling in this video, it's because this bit of skin right here in my upper lip is still really chapped, so it actually puts me in physical pain to smile. Usually I try to smile a good bit in my videos, but today I'm going to try to not smile at all. Anyway, this tier list is going to be a little bit different than usual. This tier list is going to be nothing more than just like a visual indicator of where I'm ranking the games, because this isn't going to be the traditional SABCD. We're going to be ranking it like from worst to best. Like in 7th place, this game goes here. In 6th place, this game goes here. Does that make sense? And out of all of these games, the only one that I have not played yet is Sekiro. And look, I know it's made by From Software and it's like in the Soulsborne category. But from everything I've heard about this game, it almost seems like Sekiro isn't really even like a Souls game. Like it isn't really even much of an RPG. It's basically just like a fast-paced combat game with some familiar Souls elements. That's just what I've heard, at least. I don't know if that's true. I obviously haven't played it yet, so I can't really judge that. I also realized they have the Demon Souls remake here. I have not played the remake yet, so I'm gonna put that in didn't play because I've only played the original. I do not have a PS5 yet. Coming in at the absolute bottom of my ranking, we have Dark Souls 2 Scholar of the First Sin. Do not get this confused with Dark Souls 2 Vanilla. This is Dark Souls 2 Scholar of the First Sin, the worst edition of Dark Souls 2. I'm not gonna go too in-depth on each game because I don't want this to be like an hour-long video. Dark Souls 2 in itself is a very flawed game, and Dark Souls 2 did nothing but amplify those issues. Enemy spam is one of the biggest issues I have with this game, especially. I'll cover more of some of the more fundamental flaws when we rank Dark Souls 2, but in terms of Dark Souls 2 Scholar of the First Sin, I talked about it in my video called Dark Souls 2 After 100 Hours of Elden Ring. In the opening area alone, when you get up to that corpse by the tree, there's literally 12 enemies just sitting there waiting for you. In what world should there be 12 swift enemies waiting for you in an opening area of a Souls game? It's not to a manageable degree either. It's just 12 enemies just swarming you. Like, why? And then you have Iron Keep. Need I mention Iron Keep? Shrine of Amana? Nobody likes Shrine of Amana. In Scholar of the First Sin, that is, because in Dark Souls 2 Vanilla, those areas are actually quite manageable. And since I seem to keep bringing up Dark Souls 2 Vanilla, we might as well rank it now. That would go 6th place for me, honestly, right above Scholar of the First Sin. Vanilla does everything that Scholar of the First Sin edition did, but did it better, even though Vanilla came before Scholar. The enemy spam, while it still exists in a few areas, it is nowhere near as egregious. Item placements also make a lot more sense in Vanilla. And overall, the game is just a lot more tolerable in the Vanilla version. However, that being said, there are still many fundamental flaws with the game, the agility stat even existing in the first place. To this day, I still don't understand why they decided to implement that into the game. Many of the areas are absolutely garbage in this game. Black Gulch, Earthen Peak. In terms of world design, now, while world design and cohesion of the world doesn't necessarily detract or add to my overall gameplay experience, it does matter from an immersion standpoint. So when you get on an elevator to go from Earthen Peak up to Iron Keep, it takes me out of the game and ruins my immersion. There's just an overall lack of cohesion, and I found it very hard to get immersed into this game compared to any of the other Souls games. I mean, there's still a lot of engrossing and immersive moments sprinkled throughout the game, do not get me wrong. Just because these games are ranking at the bottom does not mean they are bad by any means. I said this in a YouTube video a while ago, but just because I say that Dark Souls 2 is my least favorite From Software game, you gotta remember, it's still a From Software game, which means at the end of the day, it's still an absolutely amazing game. It's just that there's a lot of fundamental flaws with this game, and this goes beyond, you know, the small things that I talked about, like agility stats and some of the more questionable areas in the game. We also got to consider the bosses. The bosses in this game are an absolute joke. None of them pose any threats at all. The only threats that occur in this game are from the areas. All in all, at this point, I'm just hoping that it can get the Blue Point remake treatment at some point, so this game can hopefully at least come close to its original vision, or at least utilize some of the potential that this game most certainly has. Next up, in number 5, I'm going to put Demon Souls. I thoroughly enjoyed and still do enjoy Demon Souls quite a bit. Now, there is a few issues with this game. First things first, there is literally just missing content in the game. The 6th Archstone, it still saddens me that there wasn't ever a DLC or an update or anything they could have done to add it into the game. I understand there was time constraints, but it's just, every time I play that game, I just have that overwhelming feeling that something's missing, because the 6th Archstone is there, it's still in the game, it's just, the content had to be cut due to time constraints. And it's honestly sad, because honestly, if it wasn't for that and a few other problems that I have with the game that we're about to discuss, I honestly feel like it could have ranked a bit higher. A few other problems I have with the game, which this issue also affected Dark Souls 2, and is part of the reason why I also ranked Dark Souls 2 as low, but it's the HP loss after death. I do not like that mechanic at all. It was in Demon Souls, I didn't like it there. In Dark Souls 2, I did not like it. In Dark Souls 2 Scholar of the First Sin, I especially didn't like it. Roll Tendency was just more annoying than an actual fun gameplay mechanic, in my opinion at least. I also really didn't like the over-encumbering mechanic. However, I heard that the remake actually fixed that. I'm glad that they at least addressed it there. I also wasn't a huge fan of the bosses. Most of the bosses in this game come down to like gimmicks or puzzle bosses. Outside of that though, I absolutely adore and love this game. The atmosphere in the game is just top notch, even to this day, the original one. I promise you, if you turn on a PS3 and you pop in the original Demon Souls, you will have no problem getting immersed immediately, even if the graphics and gameplay is a little bit dated. The ambient noises and ambient soundtrack in the game, the way each of the levels in the world is designed as a whole, enemies, enemy design, enemy placement, everything just feels like it belongs. It feels so tight-knit. It is such a great experience. I'm also a little biased because I grew up with like older RPGs back in the day, and I just love that feeling of those. It has that like classic feeling, like 5th/6th/early 7th gen RPG where it's like, it's a little clunky, but it still feels satisfying. Similar to something, say, like Dragon's Dogma, or heck, maybe even something like an Oblivion or a Skyrim to an extent. I'm not saying the combat is anything comparable to that. I'm just saying in the jank that it has. I won't talk about this game too much more because the original is an exclusive to PS3 and the remake is an exclusive to PS5, and I know there's a lot of people that haven't gotten to play the game yet that still really want to. Just for the sake of spoilers, we're going to move on from that, but I highly recommend checking out either the original or the remake. Both are great options. Next up, this is going to blow some people's mind, but at number 4, we have Elden Ring. Now, I know I'm going to get a lot of backlash for this, and I've spoke my piece on Elden Ring, so we're not going to linger on this any longer than we have to. For me, when it comes to Souls games and what I look for in Souls games, I like the Metroidvania style level design of the original games and the more linear path. There's just something I really love and adore about that tight-knit experience that you got from classic From Software games. Now, I'm not saying that the open world is bad by any means. It is far from bad, and everything that they accomplished with this game is nothing short of a miracle in today's like modern gaming scene. Personally, it's just not for me, and it's not what I look for in a Souls game personally. I still enjoyed the game and I had a lot of fun with it, but comparing it to the other games, I really didn't enjoy it as much on my first playthrough, and I definitely did not enjoy it anywhere near as much on the following playthroughs. This game's replayability for me is just, it's nowhere near any of From Software's previous games, not by a long shot. I remember my original Elden Ring playthrough, I had so many people yelling at me in my comments. They were like, dude, you need to slow down. You need to go explore the open world. Whereas all I wanted to do was just tackle the next main boss, see what's gonna happen next in the story. I was just trying to go from Margit to Godric to Renala, up to Altus Plateau. I wanted to keep moving the plot. I wanted to see what happened next. I was playing it for that classic Souls experience. You move at your own pace. If you want to stick to the main path, okay. If you want to veer off and do optional stuff, I mean, you can, but by no means is it required. Whereas in Elden Ring, if you don't veer off and go off and do the optional stuff, you're definitely going to be struggling. That's why the motto with Elden Ring is, well, if you're struggling, just go do some dungeons, go level up, and then come back later. But see, for somebody like me, that's just not really my type of thing. If I'm playing a Souls game, I like that tight-knit, linear, intentional experience. And again, this is all just personal preference. This is just my opinion. Personally, I just didn't find this game very replayable, and even by the time that I got to the end of this game, I found myself so burnt out on reading through comments of people trying to tell me what to go find and do out in the open world, and trying to find myself things to do in the open world. Like, I didn't care about any of that. I wanted to stick to the main path and have a nice experience. I don't know, it's just going and exploring through an open world for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours on end just doesn't really appeal to me, considering the fact that there's not much to this open world. Now, I know I'm gonna get so much backlash for saying that, but seriously, in a combat-centric game, what else is there to do in the open world besides loot up items and materials and runes, fight enemies, find dungeons, or ride around on Torrent? There's really, there's nothing else to it. Riding around on Torrent is just another form of traversal, so we might as well not even count that. You're either killing enemies, you're going out and seeking out certain items, or farming up runes, or, I don't know, maybe you're doing like an arbitrary task for an NPC quest, like, say you're doing Raya's quest, you need to go up north like 500 feet to the guy's shack, get the necklace, take it back to Raya. Maybe you're doing like small busy work like that. But outside of that, there's really not much to do in this massive open world. The open world really just serves as a gateway point between A and B, along with serving like 500 different options between A and B that honestly just get really repetitive after a while. Most of the dungeons are copied and pasted. A lot of the bosses in the dungeons are copied and pasted. Honestly, by the time I got to Altus Plateau, I stopped messing around with Everjails and the dungeons and stuff. I got so burnt out on it because they just weren't interesting to me anymore. And there's a few side paths that I absolutely love. Like, you have Castle Sol and then Carry a Manor. Like, those areas areas are absolutely amazing, and the fact that they're entirely optional still just blows my mind. And then, like, Volcano Manor and the whole, like, Town Underground, like, those areas are absolutely amazing. And honestly, areas like the Town Underground, I actually really liked areas like that because it felt more like a traditional Souls area. Very tight-knit, very intentional. It felt very connected. Whereas when you're in the open world, like Liurnia or the Weeping Peninsula, Limgrave, and you're just out there, it's just kind of aimlessly wander around a torrent, occasionally hitting a sheep or a roaming guard. I don't know, after the first playthrough, it's just, I don't know. And as weird as this may sound, my favorite part of Elden Ring was the last quarter of the game. The last quarter of the game that everybody says, oh, Elden Ring wasn't the same after that point. It just wasn't as good. It was a boss rush. That was the part that I liked. From Farum Azula until the credits, that is the only part of Elden Ring that keeps me replaying it. That whole last segment. From the time that you defeat the fire giant and then you go up to the thing and you watch that cutscene and then you're teleported to Farum Azula, I love that last stretch of the game because Farum Azula in itself, it's like a nice combination of new and old where it feels like a classic Souls area with some of the Elden Ring elements, implementing some more like the platforming and jumping elements that were introduced in Elden Ring, despite one of the bosses not being so great, Godskin Duo. Otherwise, I love the flow of the area in the game for that last bit. That was my favorite part of the game. Anyway, we talked about Elden Ring for way too long, so at number 3, we're going to put Bloodborne. And this is funny because I'm literally I'm a little bit past halfway in Bloodborne right now, okay? And that first half of the game, I've enjoyed this more than the 50+ episodes that I've made on Elden Ring. There's not much I can say about Bloodborne that hasn't already been said. I love the combat in the game and how it pushes you to be aggressive with the rally mechanic. Bosses all keep you on your toes. It's always just a heart-racing battle to the death every time that you encounter a boss. Like right now, I can finally look back on bosses like Gascoigne, Vicar Amelia, and such, and it's just like, those are some of my favorite fights from Software now. Do they rank in my top 5 or top 10 bosses from all of From Software? No, not necessarily, but there's also like a whole other half of the game that I haven't seen yet, so, you know, I know that the best is yet to come. Along with the overall graphics and visuals of the game, the soundtrack. Even though this game is somewhat lacking in build variety compared to the other Souls games, I feel like that's almost a good thing because it allowed them to hone in on the builds and weapons that are available in the game and refine them to such a point that everything feels viable and balanced and satisfying. No matter what path or weapon you choose in this game, it will all pay off and it will all reward you greatly as long as you put the time and upgrade materials into the weapons that you choose. And like I said, to go on any more about this game would just be rehashing what has already been said. It is an absolutely phenomenal game, and it is in my top 3 From Software games, and I haven't even beaten it yet. It's such an amazing game, and it almost makes me not want a Bloodborne 2 just because this game is so fantastic that I wonder, like, would a Bloodborne 2 just tarnish its legacy? Like, what if we get a Bloodborne 2 and it turns out like a Dark Souls 2? I'm not saying it would, but it almost makes me appreciate this for what it is and just want this to be like the one Bloodborne experience just because it's that good. Can't wait to finish my playthrough of this game, and I don't think it's going to end up ranking any higher just for certain personal reasons with these last 2 games, but it'll always be in the top 3, no doubt. Next up, we got Dark Souls 3. It ended off my favorite From Software trilogy. Out of all the From Software games, I am most certainly a Souls guy above anything else. Dark Souls 3 was a beautiful blend of everything old and new. It took some of the combat mechanics from Bloodborne in terms of implementing more dodging and quicker combat. Build variety was as great as it always has been in any other Souls game up to that point. In terms of bosses, like, overall, I think this game still has my favorite bosses to fight out of any Souls game. Most of the areas are pretty great in this game too, though there are a few stinkers. I think like Farron Keep, Smoldering Lake. But aside from those few stinker areas, most of the areas in this game are absolutely phenomenal, and I love the callbacks to the older games with like Anor Londo, and then obviously the whole final battle is just one big callback to the end with Dark Souls 1. Words cannot describe my love and appreciation for Dark Souls 3. After playing through Dark Souls 2, I had kind of lost hope in From Software, honestly, because up to this point, okay, you gotta remember, I just started playing From Software games back in October. I played Dark Souls 1, hopped immediately to Dark Souls 2. I beat Dark Souls 2, and at that point, I was just kind of ready to give up, but then Dark Souls 3 restored my love and kept me going up to this point now, where, well, I've played basically every single From Software Soulsborne type game besides Sekiro. Fun fact about me, you guys may not have known, Soul of Cinder, the final boss in this game, that is actually my favorite From Software fight to date. That boss overall is just perfect to me. The aesthetics of the boss, the visuals of the boss, the lore, the soundtrack, the gameplay mechanics, it is just through and through my favorite boss in From Software history, period. And one other fun fact about me, I figured I'd mention real quick before we rank the final game. I have been playing From Software games longer than I realized. When I started playing Dark Souls 1 back in October, I thought that was my first From Software game. Little did I know that Armored Core was made by From Software. I am a huge Armored Core fan. I have been playing Armored Core for years. I played the crap out of Armored Core 4 on my PS3. I had no idea that was From Software. Metal Wolf Chaos. I also did not know that was From Software. Another game I love. Anyway, fun facts and all that aside, yeah, it's obvious what goes number one. For me, it is Dark Souls 1. This is a combination of things. I've spoken my piece on Dark Souls 1 many times, so I'll try to keep this as short and sweet as possible. This was my first From Software experience, and it was nothing short of magical. It also came into my life at a time when I most certainly needed it most. I know this is like the most cliche thing in the world, but it really did. I was going through a lot at the time, emotionally, and just real life. I had a lot going on, and this game, the biggest lesson that I took away from this game was that no matter how hard life gets and no matter what stands in your way, you can always knock it down. You can always overcome it. There is always a way. You will always triumph as long as you try hard enough. Sometimes it'll take everything that you have, but as long as you fight and push with everything that you've got and you don't let go of hope, you will always overcome what stands in your way. Now, I know this is probably stretching the original intention of the artistic message of Dark Souls 1, but the way that I interpreted it, because again, video games are art, and art is entirely left up to the interpretation of the person receiving or consuming the art. I look at Dark Souls 1 and its world as a whole as not necessarily a reflection, but just like, I don't even know what the word is called. Not personification, but whatever it's called. As we'll just call it an image, I guess, or a reflection of life, and then all of the bosses and hurdles in the game are almost like the challenges and things that you deal with on a day-to-day basis. Each of the bosses, to me, just kind of resemble like these everyday hurdles or certain challenges that you're going through in your life or whatever's knocking you down, and you gotta try your best. You gotta do everything you can to overcome it, get through it, and move on. Because at the end of the day, no matter what happens, as long as you give it your all, and as long as you fight as hard as you can, you'll always make it through to the other side. Well, I could go on and on talking about this game and how great all of its areas are and how great the bosses are and this, that, and the other. Obviously, there's a few down moments like Lost Izalith, Bed of Chaos, like, you know, and the last half of the game as a whole, it's not as tight-knit as the first half of the game, but I still thoroughly enjoy it, if I'm being honest. For me, the only really, like, bad area in this game would be Lost Izalith and Bed of Chaos. I really don't like that boss in that area, but otherwise, I love this game through and through. Anyway, yeah, this is my ranking for all of the Souls games. Now I want to hear from you guys down below. Do you agree? Do you disagree? How would you rank the games? Whatever you're thinking, please let me know. But anyway, as always, a shout out to the patrons and channel members: Karma's Figure, I'm a Little Bitty Tab, Big Daddy Matty, Chiluposaurus Rex, Razak, Polar, Ray, De Webster, Lamas, Bianca's, Purgatory, Drip Cassant, Melalaskin, Computer Magic, Mason Irving, TGRY15, Flim71, Aaron Reynolds, and Unknown. Thank you guys for watching. Have an amazing day. Stay beautiful. I love you all. And remember, don't go hollow. Peace. Why'd I say it like that? It's like, peace, 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 peace. Y'all ever say a word so much that it just stops making sense? Peace. No, that sounded weird. Peace. That sounded better.